recording. Okay, so what are the examples? Sorry, what are the examples? I'm having too much fun here. Social comparison. Or are we the saints who never engage in the social comparisons? I love you, but I don't trust you on that. Sorry. We're talking about, yes, Jan.
I look at people who have the job that I want. Right now, after being in the industry for so many years, I want to move up.
Some of the people had a bachelor's degree, even master's degree. Okay, manager. Exactly. Great. Professionally, we're gonna go back to the work example. Anybody else? Anybody else? Those of you who spend a lot of time in gym, you don't know that person's name, but you know them. You know them and you admire their whatever that, quad or bicep or, the triceps or whatever. How did I get that? We're talking about social media, right? Some of those people who inspire you, there's motivational videos. It's kind of like upward comparison. And again, it's not fair probably because they're not spending, like 50 hours per week studying and just doing other things. They're focusing on probably exercise and probably YouTube career or whatever career. It's not probably fair comparison, but we do these things and they impact our leisure behavior, leisure choice, and their well-being as well. Now, Tesser's study, and I know you're immediately drawn to this picture, but let's focus on the left side first. Tesser's study is one of the classics that chapters cited about kind of like a social comparison. And it really speaks to the quote unquote part of the nature of a human being when it comes to comparison. So what Tesser found was that we kind of engage automatically when someone close to you achieves something great. It could be your partner, it could be your family member, it could be your siblings. Comparisons are very fierce among siblings. It could be best friend, right? Now, here's the truth. Well, mostly, not everybody. But if the activity where your significant other, what partner or friend succeeded, is relevant to you. For example, your student, your best friend is also a student, and they got, let's say, major scholarship in the study, right? That's relevant to you to an extent because you're also a student. Maybe you could have gotten that scholarship too. You could have applied, or you actually did apply for that scholarship, and you go like, Now you know where this study is going. That what they found was that actually there's a loss. Your self-esteem goes down because that's automatic or almost automatic upward social comparison. It does happen, and it's not all about self-esteem, right? Self-esteem. I don't necessarily think that self-esteem is always good, but that happens. Now, the opposite is the case. Now, if the activity is irrelevant to you, like, for example, let's say you're a student now and somebody has professional career and then something promotion, great thing happened to them. Like, it's irrelevant. Like, you're not going to get that promotion. You're not even in the same field. You're in a birth degree and they're in, let's say, engineering, right? So it's very irrelevant. And then that's where actually boost in our self-esteem can happen. That you can probably be proud of, hey, my partner achieved, I'm very proud of them, right? That actually increase your self-esteem too. So apparently, according to this classic study, and it's been repeatedly supported multiple times with the different contexts, different types of people, students, workers, adults, older adults, so on and so forth, that this has been case. And I just put this picture. It's me, and then finally you see my wife. Actually, this is my wife. Jinjing. We're both like professors now. We do research and teaching, both of us. So you see, and this picture is like 5 years ago, and I feel like this is just a life advice. It's going to be challenging if you pick a partner who does the same thing or very similar things to you, because everything she achieved or he achieved in their job can be directly over here. So I'm as proud as I am about her accomplishment, but sometimes it also gives me, dang, I didn't get that, type of thing. So that's the difficulty. That's the story I wanted to share. Hey, Krista, that's my wife. That's a key takeaway. I'll give you the notes actually later, okay? So what do you think about, we talked about a little bit about social media, but do you think, now you were kind of born or grew up with, at least with the social media, does that help social media? Does it make it worse? Like, does it make it more frequent? Do you engage in a social comparison more frequently because of social media? B, do you think social media-based social comparison is worse, quote unquote worse? Like, does it make you feel worse than compared to like actual social comparison, like someone sitting next to you? What do you think? Or do you even post, do you do anything on a social media to do social comparison to an extent? Sometimes. To prove, if you will, to prove that you're quote unquote better off than other people. Like downward social comparison. Makes sense? They're showing that you're better than another. Well, not showing that, feeling that. Actually, one of my research students' research show that this happens quite a bit. The social media is strongly connected to social comparison. There's more and more research. And also people doing more social comparison on social media also leads to affect our tourism destination choice. It would make us to choose destinations that are conspicuous, like place like Paris. Then everybody goes, whoa, you went to Paris? The Eiffel Towers, the Emmeline Palace, and all those places, the little dishes and all that kind of thing. Versus like we name somewhere a random city in Asia and you go like, where is it? Right? So comparison, the famous city that give you more status and so on and so forth. The last social influence, social interaction that we talk about, major one, is the discrimination. And obviously that's important one. And this is how the chapter defined. It's a denial of equal treatment based on a prejudice, people's feeling toward a certain group, stereotyping, people's thinking, over generalized thinking pattern about certain group. Now, Monica Sadowska, who is a researcher in US, studied a lot of immigrants, undocumented immigrants as well, Hispanic, Black people in the States. She realized, well, she had a theory that we tend to engage in these 3 steps when we engage in our discrimination in leisure context. And that's not specific to leisure, but our focus was leisure. Now, first, we have this generalized belief about certain groups. Asian people, Italian people, Nigerian people, so on and so forth, right? Iranian people. And then we create this attitude toward group members in a particular context with their new event happening, with the new information. And I'm going to give you an example. The recent one, for example, major one is the pandemic. The pandemic happened, but even before that, we all have some belief about quote unquote Asian people, for example, or Chinese people to be specific, right? And then good or bad, it could be good too, right? It's almost impossible not to have any belief, whether we are explicit about it or not. Now, then the pandemic happened and we get this news coverage saying that, well, CDC reported that the virus seems to be coming from certain city in China, for example. Now, regardless of that's true or not, the validity of it, that is a new context we're talking about here. Make sense? That's a new context. That's a new situation where we're framing, we're creating and reshaping our attitude toward a certain group member. Make sense? And obviously, as we know, what happened was that there was more, anti-Asian discrimination. So that shaped that, ooh, quote unquote, they're the one. Well, now that's an interesting association people make. Oh, then you must have brought the virus. No, of course not. Obviously not that person exactly. It could be just like other people, Euro-Canadian who went to China and brought it back. It might as well, possible. It's a globalized word, but we have that attitude. And then finally, you're encountering a particular individual who seems to be part of that group. And then some people, not everybody, but some people engage in this quote unquote mental calculation of cost and the benefits of the discrimination. Now, it's horrible things to say that there's a benefits to discrimination. Okay. But if you think about it, there are sometimes tangible benefits, right? That if we exclude someone from the something enjoyable, something beneficial to the people, like, a privilege to access a certain recreation center, for example, right? The space and time. If we exclude people from it, there's a more space and time for other people. At least sometimes that's what we think. Or sometimes it's the emotion that you have, that negative emotion, the frustration that you cannot do anything about it. And you have to just let it go. You need that target for it. It happens. So there's sometimes tangible and a more emotional, intangible benefits to the discrimination too. And then there's a cost, of course. These days, you say stuff and you get taken in a video and you put it on your social media, it goes viral, and then just like you're done. We have so many cases where people lost their jobs. People know their names. Oh, you're the person who just, type of things. Okay. Now, the problem with this model, I can see this could happen, and especially the 1 and 2 is very important. The third part assumes that not all, but most of discrimination is rational, that we think. But obviously, as you can see on the social media, if you Google search, that not all people who engage in discrimination are rational or, thinking through the cost and benefits too. But sometimes this is the important part too. Now, I want you to go to E-class under chapter 8. And if you don't have a device, I'll give you a piece of paper. I printed out. Oh, I didn't even tell you any you printed out. Who needs a piece of paper? Who needs a piece of paper? Who wants a piece of paper? Because I already killed the tree, so you can use it if you want. Thank you, Hope. There's a paper that I wrote. Sorry, yes, self-promotion. But there's one paragraph that's relevant to this topic. So I want you to read this yellow part. And there's one question in it. So I want you to think about that question. Find that question. Think about the question. And think about the question in terms of this model. This theory. 3 steps. It feels very weird because I don't typically assign my students to read my work. I hate doing that. If you want to read whole thing, it's just an essay. It's on E-class. You done? Do you recognize all those cases that I cited here? Actually, some of those cases? Yeah, some of them are very famous. Anyway, so did you get my question? Where's the question? Can anybody read it for me? For us? and I need a. Okay, Josh, go ahead.
Is there anything specific about leisure that triggers and exacerbates these interracial discriminations and conflicts?
Thank you, Josh. So my question is, when we see a lot of these cases that we show, and not just, not just the pandemic and anti-racial racism and anti-Asian racism, anything else, we are hitting the point where we actually recognize, and we talked about some cases in our RS 102, that actually a lot of bad things happen in leisure. We thought that leisure is this happy, fun place, and then you know what? We're keep getting these contexts too. So is there actually anything in leisure that make this easy? What do you think? Would these people do the same thing if it was, for example, their workplace? Instead of having a champagne and a steak at the restaurant, if you were working and having work meeting, would you engage in this almost nonsensical yelling at the people?
Lose your job.
It's immediate. Well, actually, he kind of lost the job anyway, but it's immediate. The consequence, right? In our head, the cost is very clear. If you do that, and obviously workplace has more regulations around that too. That there's, for example, many companies have zero anti-tolerance, zero tolerance type of policies. And then if you just violate that, that's it. You're out. Anything else? Yes.
Like minimum wage jobs, and I feel like there's a lot of entitlement like over people who are in those work. Like customers might be entitled to treat those people poorly because I guess like social comparison.
So the people who come to those places, right? Sometimes, thank you, that they have this idea that they're quote unquote more coming from more position of power. That people should serve you. That you have more, somehow you're in a better position than other people. So you can say stuff, you can do stuff. For those of you who worked in an industry like as a waitress industry, probably sometimes, not everybody, but there are some people sometimes engage. Maddie.
Sports and stuff like that have higher class standards so they can not like class standards, but it's more tailored to people with more money, so people can be they can unintentionally be discriminating against the other cultures and stuff because they're oh, this is not for you guys because you don't have the money for it, or you weren't grown up into it and stuff like that.
Thank you, Maddie. Actually, there are other forms of process of discrimination or exclusion, that there's a separation, right? And in chapter actually talk about sometimes it comes as, for example, private membership. Any of you played something like a golf, tennis, yacht, club sports? There's a membership, right? Sometimes it's just the money. And I've been worked in one of the best golf clubs in Japan. Annual membership still, and the golf industry in Japan collapsed, but still $300,000. And you need 5 internal referees. The existing member has to report to you, 5. And then you have to go 2 layers of security background check. We'll hire a private investigator and you'll be followed. Yes, we do. Because we have celebrities and sports, politicians, celebrities and everything. We do that much. That's that level of exclusion. And sometimes those actually exclusive club, quote unquote prestigious club, they have even segregated women. They didn't even have the lockers for women, bathroom for women for a long time. Absence, the Maddie was also talking about a little bit of that the absence, sometimes we don't exclude per se, but certain, for example, sports group. Maybe it's a hockey, maybe it's let's say figure skate. You go there and you don't see quote unquote someone like you, someone look like you. And it just gives a clear message that is this the price for you? Maybe this is not the price for you. Actually, I'm conducting research about the racism in sports in Alberta, collaborating with a nonprofit here. And I was making presentation last week. And one of the major findings was this, that actually, for example, many Black athletes, we have more and more immigrants in Canada coming from the African countries, right? And the Black athletes are more coming in. And then this is the barrier that they face. They go to the practice, they go to the competitions, and then they're the only one who, quote unquote, look Black. Go ahead, sir.
Because I have a friend who's in synchro, and with that, everyone wants to be synchronized, but they also do that with like body types and also like skin color
Interesting.
and hair.
Interesting. Thank you. You hear? Synchronized swimming. We have other things like synchronized skating, figure skating too. That because it has to be quote unquote sync group. It has to be the synchronized harmony. It has to be the pair because it's a figure skating pair. We unintentionally sometimes maybe, and we have this what is called implicit bias too, that we actually make them matching because, well, they should match up better because they look similar, or maybe not. Now, the last one is a more immediate, easy one, that there's a conflict between the different groups of users, staff members, even sometimes police officers as well. So those are important issues, and hopefully we get you thinking that actually we're getting into, and that doesn't make leisure bad. I mean, any situation can happen, can create discrimination. But maybe us future leisure, recreation, sports, tourism practitioners, knowing what about our field that sometimes facilitate people to do this and thinking about strategy around it may be very important. Now, the second part of the chapter 8 talk about leisure constraints, and I hope you remember this thing, constraints. And if you don't, or if you haven't taken 100, this is the definition. Okay, this is the definition. And we have 3 types of leisure constraints. I'm going to go through them quickly because we know that. And to get to the point. The first type is intrapersonal, within ourselves, which affect the directory our preference. When we have this strong, we don't even want to do certain leisure activity. Make sense? And that's a little different from idea of barrier, because typically barrier means that we want to do something, but we can't because there's something in between. No, in terms of this, we don't even want to do it. We don't even realize we're constrained. Things like personality traits stuff, poor leisure attitude, certain norms, but the internalized norm. The second is interpersonal constraints. That are social factors, both impacting both our preference as well as participation. So for example, when you experience discrimination, we talked about, next time you feel like you don't want to even go to that place or do the activity, right? It impacts our preference. Now, if you, let's say, play badminton like I do, it's very difficult to play badminton alone. It's very difficult. You try. So that's lack of companionship. And sometimes you want to do it, but you can't because of those interpersonal factors. And the last piece is structural constraints, which is non-social factor that stop preferences from manifesting, leading into basically becoming actually behaviors. We want to, in this context, we want to do it, but we can't because of, for example, lack of time, lack of money, transportation issues, program availabilities. You're working from 8 to 5. All the programs, spin classes you want to go is 8 to 5, then you can't. And then the last one, weather, speaking of badminton. Now, what's important is this in chapter 8, in this course, is that those things are actually socially shaped as well. Even something structural, even something that we think, quote unquote, tangible, objective, how much money you have. It's not just the quote unquote income level and so on and so forth, if you think about it. For example, interpersonal constraints, something inside us. One of the common examples is this poor leisure attitude, which happens typically with the strong work ethic. When you're like work, hard work, then leisure becomes the constellation, leisure becomes the reward. You know, you have to work hard all the time, and then you can enjoy some leisure. Sometimes we socialize this from older generation who went through quote unquote more tough living situation. They had to make it, they have to work hard 60, 80 hours per week, right, in the field sometimes to provide their family. Maybe your grandparents, maybe your parents, maybe yourself too. We socialize that, we internalize that, we learn. Maybe sometimes it's that what they tell you, right? In my family, this is what we do. We work hard. Like Jenna, your last name is Nelson, right? The Nelson work hard. You know, that type of mentality, right? Sometimes. And sometimes we internalize, you're Nelson too, I know. Internalize that. Or sometimes we role model. That we don't know, nobody tell you that explicitly, but we see your grandparents and parents working hard, right? And you just work hard because you think that you kind of respect it, and you should be. It's good, you know, good things too. And you kind of, yeah, that's how work and life balance should be. You work hard like 90% of the time, and then 10% is leisure. Now that's not necessarily healthy, probably, but you know, we model that. Another one is gender. And there's so many examples, but research over the past 40 years shows that this ethic of care is a strong constraint, interpersonal constraints. Have you seen something? Have you heard someone say this? Or even if you ever had a child, do you think you're going to feel this way? You say you're not super rich and you got extra $200. Would you spend it on you? Or would you spend it on your child? Or family, at least, you know, something that family can get her.
Or your dog.
Or your dog, yes. Dog gets toy, always. He's a good boy. But that's the thing, right? That we have a strong ethic of care, and it's gendered. The research repeatedly shows that in our society, unfortunately, women still tends to feel this way, that there's a socialization. We know mothers tends to strongly feel that, the biological mother. Even in some cultures, and also rural area, sisters, oldest sister, they basically sometimes are expected to behave like a mother. We call them mother sister, right? They're the mother, they're the kind of like a second mother in a family. And we socialize that too. Interpersonal constraints is obviously, that's the obvious one. That's obviously social, right? Discrimination, that's a social factor. But think about it. This is going to happen to you. Even something like a lack of companionship, you may feel like, well, that's just like, you know, us having friends or not friends, maybe. Well, not necessarily. That it relates to social institutions. Research shows that right after you get a job, you graduate, congratulations. You get a job, congratulations, I'm happy for you. But your social life is gonna be like, I'm telling you. Your best friend, you're gonna see them in a half a year if you're lucky. Why? Because everybody's busy, right? And especially if you're single too, that you don't have that partner, you can always share that life activities. You're working adult, young, single, then you're most likely face that. Because the work institute that actually require you to be doing the stuff work from 8 to 4 and then exhaust you, right? So your weekend, you're like a little bit of zombie. Let me do some laundry so I can actually have the work attire for the next week. And also marriage is a social institution. So if you don't, quote unquote, opt into it, then it's more difficult to have that, you know, sometimes partnership and or companion sometimes. And the last thing, structure constraints. That is not even objective and, you know, exist in a social vacuum. They're shaped by social factors. For example, we know by Ed Jackson's study, he was a professor actually here at the U of A, not the KSR, but geography. He found that actually this is teenage This is teenage, 20 years old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50, 60, 70, and how constraint become more powerful and intense. So the higher, the more constraining, basically. And then this red one is this commitment. So commitment, like work commitment, family commitment, other relationship commitment, community, neighborhood commitment, so on and so forth, right? So that means lack of time. Basically, this is lack of time, okay? Because more committed, you only have 24 hours, lack of time. That goes up at the 30s and 40s. In 30s and 40s. Why? Because why? Why 30s and 40s you have too many commitments? Job, you're getting into that gut part, like you're getting promoted, you're going to be the leader, manager, and family. That's a big one, family. Especially we tend to launch a family, child rearing happening over here. A lot of it here. Social institution, right? Now, interestingly though, this one right there, not interesting, but may make sense. You experience this cost. So a lack of money, its influence radically, not radically drop from teens to 20. Now you're here, many of you are, some of us are more, down the road, and we experience that lower and lower. So as we move along in our society and life, actually the constraints importance changes. So depending on where you think, for example, where you are, but also where your customers are, primary groups of customers are, which actual constraint you have to work around. If you're working with the seniors, that's very different, landscape of constraints compared to 20s, those in 20s. So who is your customers? And now constraint was the one that we talked about in RLS 100, but more recent research is showing that it's not surprising. There are positive counterparts. It's not just barriers. There are facilitators, opportunities. And that's called facilitators here. And some of the example, and they can be categorized into the 3 ways, like we did: intrapersonal, interpersonal, structural. Interpersonal example, for example, past experience. You did something, you're more likely to do something. You know that better. You feel more comfortable. Self-efficacy, you feel you're in charge, you're control, you have a control, then you're more likely to do something. Interpersonal, family, peers, authority figures, teachers, coaches, they don't just stop you from doing stuff. Obviously, they promote you, they encourage you to do things. And then finally, structural things, gender, race, ethnicity, other institutions like work. Once again, they're not just barriers if you think about it. Gender. The reverse side of, for example, let's say men are less likely to do, let's say, expressive activities, like artistic activity, like figure skating, for example, is that actually there is a gender norm that quote unquote facilitate girls and women to get into that field too. Now, the question is whether it's quote unquote a good thing or not. That's another thing. And this model proposed by Leslie Raymore, they suggested that actually these 3 layers of both constraints and facilitator, both constraints and facilitator, both constraints and a facilitator are existing in this layers and layers, and they interact with each other, right? For example, your family members shape your past experience. When you're in your childhood, your family, your parents might have brought you to certain outdoor. That's a past experience. That could be facilitating next time. But your family values may be affected by bigger issues, like, for example, lack of money or abundance of money, racial background, ethnic background, so on and so forth. And the point is that each factor potentially can be both constraining and facilitating. Each factor, like example, gender, right? It's both constraining and facilitating at the same time. It's not either or. And Monica Sadowska, once again, her research team looked at the minority youth, Black and Hispanic youth in the inner Chicago area baseball league. And their research identified 4 types of facilitator. Obviously, they're not the exhaustive example, but having that higher level of self-confidence and persistence is one. This is intrapersonal. And then you have these coaches and teammates who support you, staff, volunteers, that's interpersonal mostly. And even this, sometimes sponsors, like industry, obviously, this is hopefully where you're going. Like, for example, in the States, MLB, well, even here, Canada too, Major League Baseball sponsors some of the Little League Baseball, for example, those things as well. So without their financial contributions, sometimes it's difficult, but it's possible because of that. So what's your leisure facilitator? What's your favorite leisure activity and what facilitated? I want you to think. I want you to name 5 facilitators for your favorite leisure activity and categorize them either intra, inter, or structural. And once we're done here. Did you get it? Think about 5 facilitators for your favorite leisure and categorize them either intrapersonal, interpersonal, or structural. And we go. What do you think? What's your favorite leisure, Noah? Fishing? Let's do that. What's your first facilitator? Law?
Yeah.
Oh, rod, equipment. Equipment, rod? Okay, or law. Oh, law. Okay, there's the regulations and laws. Good. What about you, Krista and Edward and Alexia? What's your favorite leisure? They should put you like, the feet, seriously. What's your favorite leisure? Choose one. Oh my God, please tell me there's at least one favorite leisure. Just kidding. Yoga, yeah, that's good. So let's do yoga. What's the first facilitator?
Having like a studio by my house to go to.
Good one. Availability of facility. You can even check that off. Availability of facility program and also even proximity to it too. How close it is geographically. Yeah, there you go. You got it too. So what are we thinking, Evie here? What's your favorite leisure? Sorry, second. Track and field. What's your facilitator?
Well, it's pretty close to track.
Mm-hmm.
So where I live.
The proximity, closeness. Yeah, physical distance. Yes, yes. I love hearing, by the way. It's beautiful. There you go. Distance. It's that simple sometimes. So what's up, Hope? What's your favorite leisure? I'm good, thank you. What's your favorite leisure? Hockey, yeah. Okay, so what's your first facilitator? Structural, and what is it exactly? The league. Belong to league. There you go. There you go. That's structural. Yes, good one. And you can literally just stand up and go once you finish your 5. I'm not gonna just conclude it per se. You got it? Good. Have a good one. Yeah. And if you don't have a 5 facilitators, actually you go like, Jin, I don't have a 5 facilitator. Maybe we can work to find a little more facilitators, right? Like, hopefully, okay, maybe you can find a buddy to share that activity, right? Or, website resource, website that lists the resource. Bye, Kia. See ya. Did you all find the 5? You got to find the 5. You can go create stuff. I could ask you in an exam. Right. Just give me a sec.